Hello, everybody. This is Venice, and I'm so glad to see you here. Hello, Ellen, darling. And I don't know who Eoware is. And Ruben, fantastic. Good to see you, darling, as well. I have a very dear friend with me today from Los Angeles. I met you how many years ago, my love? 20 years.
Yes, at least 20 years ago. That's right.
When you were a Hollywood mover and shaker, power broker. And gosh, have you changed your life path since then, my love? And just to let you know, Olivia is in Los Angeles, and she runs I don't know if you'd call it a business. It's an educational facility and a funeral home called Sacred Crossings. And Olivia is essentially involved with educating people and allowing people to engage in a practice of conscious dying. Is that correct, darling? Would you say that's
Yes,
accurate?
that's accurate. Yes, that sums it up really. I mean, it's broader than that, but yeah, you've got the nugget. Conscious dying. How can we prepare for a conscious dying experience, which means dare we be fully present to everything as it unfolds at the end of our journey, and allow it to be like the opening of a flower into what I believe could possibly be, if we were able to stay fully present, open and aware, an orgasmic death. I mean, why not? Why we started an orgasm, why shouldn't we end as one?
Sweetie, look, I'll tell you what, I have a girlfriend that does orgasmic birth, right? And that was a mind bender for me to get my head around. But the idea of an orgasmic death is so delicious.
Well, it's something I aspire to. I have a long way to go, hopefully, both physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. But that is my belief that there's a possibility there. And why not spend the rest of my life investigating what I need to let go of and include in order to experience that? So that's my goal.
What I find so interesting about that is probably the exact opposite of the common held beliefs about what the death experience is, right? And the reason I wanted to I mean, it's like, you go, girl. It's the reason that I wanted to talk to you, for Magical Egypt is that Magical Egypt, or in ancient Egypt, there was obviously a completely different approach to death and a fascination with death. And we have reached, I think, the pinnacle of materiality when it comes to the death process. And so what I see in the work that you're doing is somewhat of a return to a very old practice, a practice that has been much more organically with us throughout the ages. And it seems that there has been a desensitization in terms of the medical approach and basically all of the providers, right, that deal with death. And so are you finding that the work that you're doing is being received with open arms, with curiosity, with fear? Like what is, given that we have this materialistic shrunken paradigm, what is the general reaction out there to what you're doing in the marketplace, if you want to call it that?
Well, there are two arms really to Sacred Crossings. One is the Institute for Conscious Dying, which is an educational portal to learn about what is this thing called death? Why am I so afraid? What do I need to embrace, include, let go of? That's one aspect of it. So the people drawn to that are like you and me. We're deeply curious. We want more information. We want to understand. So that's those people. Now, then there are the people who call me for death midwifery support, which could be anything from I just got a terminal diagnosis that the doctor told me I'm going to be dead in 3 months. I am absolutely terrified. Help me. There's that, which they, so that's a very different journey with that particular individual. And many of them for the funeral home are relatives and children of their family members who are almost dead, and they're looking for a funeral home, and they love the idea of a home funeral. So these people probably have not been investigating or interested in conscious dying at all, but they want to have a hands-on experience of caring for their dead loved one. So it's across the board. And even within the classes, I'll have a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds who are just curious about death. Some of them are very, maybe they're toying with the idea of becoming embalmers and funeral directors themselves. And then you get the middle people, the middle range, like 30 to 60, who are, they just know that they should perhaps think about this a bit more and stop being in denial. And then there's the people who are really close. They've already been diagnosed and they're getting old, and they want to start helping their family members. So they want to be the death doulas of the world. So I honestly can't say. I thought, honestly, I've been doing it for 15 years, and I thought by now everyone would be knocking on my door wanting a home funeral, because they'd all see how glorious it was and how could we have given this up to a funeral industry. And I honestly believe that every funeral home would have hired a death midwife, and the hospitals this would be a thing by now, but it's very slow. I say it's one body at a time.
But look, I'll
It's going
tell
to
you
take
what.
forever.
Look, I want to invite you to an app called Clubhouse that I've been spending a bit of time on. And Clubhouse is a social network where people get to talk about things. And what I find fascinating, and in fact, I was listening to one as I was getting ready for this, is that there seems to be a lot more discussion around death going on. And I think that COVID has brought to the fore the idea of one's mortality, perhaps more tangibly than it had been in 2019. And so I'm seeing, and maybe it's just, that red car phenomenon. When you want a red car, you see it. I am seeing in the last year a lot more, at least, discussion in terms of conscious dying. And there's a girlfriend of mine that I met on Clubhouse that does these things called death cafes, where people come on like this on a Zoom and get to kind of talk about these things. So possibly, you're going to see an increase in discussion, because I fundamentally agree with you. And just so you know, guys, Livy's got an amazing video on YouTube where she basically takes you through the journey of a woman who sounds like she's in that third category of people that were diagnosed, and she allowed you to kind of film the process of her last period. And it is so incredibly touching and beautiful that it really it touched my soul, Livy. And as I was saying before the people came in, I really do believe that you're doing God's work, my dear, because it seems that, I mean, to be very brief and not to get into my story, your story with your mother aligns very much with my story with my mother. And that process, as it's handled in general, is lacking in so much love, compassion, time, ceremony, ritual, and all of those things. And that's basically what you're giving back to people.
Yeah, exactly. What I'm trying to do is empower people to reclaim what I call the lost art and healing ritual of a home funeral, which is basically do it yourself, take a deep breath, take as long as you need, your loved one like nobody else did, hold them in your arms. Okay, the only thing that's different is their heart's not beating. I promise you, he's still there. And they look at you, first of all, as if you're a little bit nuts, because they're used to being whisked away and put in a body bag in a refrigerator. And so that once they've got past that initial, what, really, I can? Yes. Then they surrender into what I call liminal space, which is the space between here and now and this world and the other world. And you get to actually experience and like death sort of floating over you, but it's not morbid and dark and sinister and weird. It's the opposite. It's like being bathed in an unconditional love and kindness that you can't really experience anywhere else, because there's nowhere as quiet as death. There's nowhere where the ego has absolutely no role at all. There's nothing more the ego can do about this. It cannot fix it. So it better stand by the door and shut up for a minute. And you know that happens to everybody in the room when a dead body is lying there on a table by the fireplace. It's astounding. And you can't really explain this to people, because until you've actually been present to it and experienced the 2 or 3 day vigil or of having that in your house, you just have no clue how it informs you and changes you. I know. I just did one this morning, and this woman said, her husband died at 10 o'clock today, and she had told me before that she wanted him to be there for at least a couple of days, but then she called this morning to say her mum was getting very nervous about this, that she didn't think she could handle his dead body in the house. And I said, that's okay, you know, we can take him if you need. And she goes, can we get rid of him tomorrow? And I was like, okay, if you need. I always say that because I know that once he's bathed and shrouded or dressed and laid on that table and covered in flowers, they won't want to get rid of him till Monday night, let alone. But I know that, they don't know that. And of course, I just sat at home, and 2 o'clock she calls me back. Oh, I think Friday would be fine for the pickup. Maybe Saturday. It's extraordinary. People don't know what they don't know. And all I'm doing is giving them permission to have an experience that up until now has been whisked out of our reality by an industry that has purported to know more than we do. And it's just it's all smoke and mirrors. They don't know. It's just a dead body. All that's happened is his heart stopped beating. Nothing weird is going to happen. It's not going to suddenly sit up. You're not going to get scared. It's not going to smell. I'll bring the dry ice. Yeah, I'm trying to sort of normalize it all and help people just calm down, take a deep breath. You'll be amazed. You take care of him. You know best. And yeah.
I think that is one aspect that is really important, is that the way that it's handled now is that death is so quick that by the time you even realize that it's happened, you're standing at a funeral home and it all whizzes by you so incredibly quickly. And you know that they're not speaking about your mother or your father. They clearly don't know them. You know, it's just a very alien and difficult experience. But one of the things, for instance, that I love in your process, so basically Livy will collect the body, she'll bring it to the home, and in some instances Livy will bring a cardboard coffin. And one of the most beautiful things that I've seen, and I'll try to pick some pictures out while Livy's talking here, is that the children, tell us about the children and the cardboard coffins, my dear.
Oh, well, first of all, for those who don't know, everybody is cremated in a cardboard box. And that's that's not the cardboard box, but
no, that's not the cardboard box. I'll find one.
Teaching. That is actually teaching the art of death midwifery. I do a demonstration, and that was a friend of mine. But so everybody is cremated in a cardboard box, but I will take a box to the house. That's my daughter and my ex, actually. That's the pine box. People decorate the pine box. And I can also take a cardboard box to the house. There's a cardboard box in there too, Venice, if you can find it, of kids, or I can email it to you. And the children decorate it. And it's an amazing way for the children to begin to process their grief when you get to decorate a box, write messages on it, paint it with flowers, or cover it with photographs. There's all manner of ways you can decorate a cremation box. So each family comes up with something deliciously different. And this is happening while the body is laying in honor in the bedroom or the living room. This box is being decorated somewhere. And yeah, that's just one of the many rituals that we include in a home funeral.
So tell me about that, Dylan. What are the rituals? And honestly, on your website, you talk about in your death midwifery training, stage 1. In fact, I'd love to ask you what, I'm just going to bring up my notes. Enter the grave, a spiritual practice. Tell me about that, sweetie.
Well, the art of death midwifery is actually a 3-part training, and it includes level 1 is enter the grave. And that's a deep dive into your personal fears, beliefs, phobias, the dreads that you have about dying. And everybody's got their list. So we begin to unpack that list. And then we look at, I give the students tools that they can begin to master in their life, so that by the time you get to your death, it will be like almost like a nothing, a no-brainer, because you'll have relived it over and over and over again. That's the goal. I mean, monks have been practicing dying for many, many million, thousands of years, because they know that this tiny little life here, 40, 60, 80 years, if you're lucky, is a blip. And the rest, what's the rest, is what we're trying to get to. So that's enter the grave. And I do a lot of somatic movement too. I have a wonderful friend who teaches somatic movement classes. And I met a woman once who was dying, and she was given 2 weeks to live. And up until then, she was a dancer and very active. And I watched her on her deathbed do what she called the death dance.
Wow.
And it actually was minute movements of her fingers and maybe her arm a tiny bit and her elbow. And what she was doing was tracking internally the thread of her life force and allowing it to move her. And when she was completely in touch with this pulse of life which exists within us, but we're not aware of it most of the time because we're too busy activating our brains and making our body do something. But when you're quiet and still enough, and you can open to your body is actually doing something all by itself from the inside out. And this is what began to, she taught me about this dance, and she called it the tantric feminine dance of power. So I began with this teacher, and I studied with her, and I learned the tantric feminine dance of power. And I thought, oh my gosh, everybody in the world has to learn how to do this, so when they die, they can do this death dance with themselves. It's erotic, it's sensual, it's so connected and embodied to the whole experience. So what I'm trying to do is to have people get so embodied in their dying days that they can actually notice the blood slowing down and the kidneys drying up and the eyeballs sinking while you're still present. I know I might be a little odd, but I think that's an incredible thing to want to experience. If you're going to be dead in a few days anyway, why not experience it to the max up until the last moment, and trust that then the last moment can be bigger and wilder than your imaginings. So that's enter the grave in a
That's
nutshell.
amazing, sweetie. Do you look at any Bardo work, or Book of the Dead, or any of the kind of more ancient teachings, and utilize those in any way?
Well, yes, bits and pieces of everything. I know, we know we've all read lots of different teachings now, so we become like a bit of a mishmash. And but the actual Bardo teachings come more into level 3, which is after the last breath, because they're speaking more of the consciousness and Powa, which is the transference of consciousness as we leave the body. But enter the grave and the conscious dying are are more of us being fully aware with all of our faculties and senses while we're in our dying days. So that's enter the grave, and conscious dying is putting your things in order, getting prepared, using these tools now that you learned hopefully in Enter the Grave, and knowing how to avoid the ER, you know, what to do if you did get a trach, those sorts of things. So level 2 conscious dying is much more nuts and bolts, everything you
And
need
that's
to know.
important as well, my dear, because like just even navigating the hospital, if you don't know what your rights are, you can very easily get swept up into the system. And it's not unless you know that you can say no, that you have an alternative, perhaps. And so that's just as may not be as romantic as the sexy tantra dying dance, but just as important to understand what your rights are, I guess.
Oh, yes, exactly. And even though we learn all that yummy stuff in Enter the Grave, I also have people really prepared for, and what if none of that happens and you are in an emergency room and you had a car accident and now you're strapped to 10 machines. Now what are you going to do? So you can't be feeling remorseful or wanting to be attached in any way to it being the lovely way you hoped it would be. Now it's not. Now it's, so how, now what are we going to do? Yeah, and sadly that is 80% of the deaths.
Yes, yes.
So
And
it's,
I wonder what pain, like how do you negotiate pain under the kind of conscious dying that you're working with? Is that a challenge to the situation?
well, I talk a lot about the difference between pain and suffering. And like pain is a physical sensation, and suffering is an emotional, mental sensation. So we learn to put space around our pain so um, we can become more aware when we're making a story around it, which equals suffering. So then we can learn to just be in pain and not be suffering, which is what you'll notice if you see an animal who's dying. They're not suffering. And an animal giving birth is not, she's not suffering. She's just giving birth. She might be experiencing pain, but it's not affecting her in the negative way that affects us humans because we do something mental and emotional with it. So as we learn to be able to differentiate between these aspects of ourselves, then a dying doesn't have to be a suffering experience. I mean, it might have pain in there. And fortunately, today there are medications that will just take that edge off that very nicely. So we really don't need to endure that either. So perhaps we can actually just ride out of here on the tantric feminine dance of power.
You've
Or
given
from
me a
the,
life goal, honey. Oh my gosh, we're going to have online. Oh, you do online classes, don't you? They are online now.
they're all online now, yes.
Yay! I was just telling Libby we're stuck here until 24, so now I can come. That'll be fantastic. Sweetie, so what have you learned about death, and has this work impacted your belief system about what comes next?
That's so interesting. I've been doing this for 15 years and people ask me that and I'm going, I know nothing more about death than I did on day one. How could I possibly? I'm not dead yet. I'm not in that journey. I watch, but what I watch is people alive in their journey. They're not, so I don't know that I know any more about death. Of course, I got a lot of ideas up my sleeve, but I'm more than happy to just flick them out and let them go the minute another piece of information comes in.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we're in an era right now where, you know, we're flooded with the next great idea. So I just stay open to it all and go, could be, yeah, could be. I mean, wow, what if? And I've learned to be very comfortable with, I don't know, and I don't care. And and I'm still the deaf midwife, you know.
Yeah, no, it's so beautiful, darling. I mean, you really brought the concept of, the power now of being present, into the last stages. And even though, as I said, I've watched all your videos and I've been looking up the subject in general, I didn't get that idea of it until talking to you today. And that's why I'm so glad that you have agreed to do this. And guys, I just want to say, if any of you have questions for Livy, please pop them in the chat box, and we'll get them all answered, because I'm learning. I've been researching Livy's work, and I'm still learning things today, which is just beautiful. So let's go to stage 3 now. So stage 3 of your training, as we say, it's a collection of different teachings. But what are you helping people understand in section 3 of the training, after the last breath?
Yes, after the last breath is everything that happens once the person has taken their last breath. So the very first thing I will do perhaps is, mark that event. And that might mean closing the chakras if somebody is open to the idea that there are energy vortexes here and the light body has to separate, and it's a good idea to close the chakras. If perhaps it's a Catholic family, say, and this is far from their idea of what's important, necessary, or anything, then we might just say a prayer together around the bed. So it all depends, and I'm not a judge of anybody's. I'm not attached to any which way, but it could mean any of those things. And then we'll begin a bathing ritual, and I invite the family to bathe, which is really just gently doing a bed bath, really. Most of my clients, they die on hospice at home anyway. They know they're going to die. They've called me ahead of time for a visit. Perhaps I've been coaching them through their death journey, sometimes not. But the family know that they want a hands-on experience, and they don't want to give the body up right away to a funeral home. So the role there is, holding back the authorities and saying, you know how to care for your loved one, and there you have the legal right to do this, and this is your body, and so care for it the way you will. And everybody is very tender and very loving. They know just how to bathe, anoint, and either dress or shroud the body. And then we find a place in the house to lay it in honor, I call it. And that might be on the bed that they were on. I take a massage table to the house and drape it beautifully. They could be moved to the massage table, or basically wherever they want to be, it's fine. We just make it look like a very sacred place. It becomes like the altar, really. Their body is placed on the altar now, and everybody who gets to move into that room steps into that liminal space in awe that this person used to inhabit this amazing body. They're not there now. Where are they? And very slowly and gracefully and gradually over 3 days, it's covered with flowers and messages, and kids come up and put things in their hands, and it's just delightful. And somewhere else in the home, the cardboard box is being decorated, or the pine box. And then I take dry ice every day to the house for 3 days, make sure that it's kept at the right temperature. So there's no decomposition at all, no smell, there's nothing. It's just beautiful. And it gives them those 3 days. It takes the psyche 3 days to really grok and understand what just happened. Even if they've been with their loved one all through their dying journey, still when they're gone, it's a little bit of a shock to the brain. So it's kind to the family to give them 3 more days to get really used to this idea. And what if the soul, the spirit, the light body, the energy, consciousness of the one who died, what if that is not a poof and you're gone? What if that
Yes.
takes 3 days?
Yes.
Christ was in the tomb for 3 days, and the Buddhists don't touch their bodies for 3 days. So I'm like, okay, why not give us 3 more days? What's the big rush here? Spent 84 years in this body. He deserves 3 more days laying there quietly at rest, so that he can fully exhale. And according to the Buddhists, they say that the inner breathing, which is the light body, it still breathes for anything up from between 1 and 3 days after death.
That
So
has
that's
been a thought
really
of mine. Sorry, darling. Go ahead. I was just going to say, I've always wondered. I had a disbelief that the person would be absent so quickly after the body. So I'm so glad that you're talking about that. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm just like, yes, okay. You verified my suspicion.
Yeah, well, some people it is they're out of there instantly, and you can tell immediately when they usually get there within 2 or 3 hours after death, and you can tell this person is still very much inside. So let's not shoo him out. Let's do the bathing ritual while he's still there. Maybe he wants this last experience. And others go right away. They've perhaps meditators, or they've they've spent a long time with dementia or something, and they couldn't wait to get out. So they're not going to stick around for another 3 days. So who knows? It's a mystery. But what I think I'm saying is there's no rush here. And we who are left behind could use the 3 days to get used to this idea and to decorate the box and plan the funeral service, because on the third day, then the body is placed in the box. There's a lovely ceremony. Well, through COVID, it's usually 5 to 10 people, but pre-COVID and post-COVID, it will be, hopefully 50, 100 people again will gather in the garden or the living room. And it's this incredible celebration, because now everybody's had all of their time to feel their sorrow, sadness, say everything they needed to say. They're ready now to celebrate. This is the woof. Now you are on your way, brother. And they pick him up quite happily and carry him out to the car. And there's this feeling of like, yes, we did it. We took him every step of the way, and now he's gone. Thank goodness, almost, but thank goodness in a good way. Thank goodness for us. It's not anything to do with this is a horrible thing. This is a dead body. This is like, it's done. It's done. The life is finished. We did it. We took him. And there's been no mystery. He hasn't been far away from anyone. Nobody's manipulated or wired his jaw shut or pumped his body with formaldehyde or anything like that. He's been right there in the home. The kids can go back and forth and touch him and come and see grandpa. And they're learning about death every time they go back in, and they get to see that it's not morbid and scary and weird. It's just the most loving, natural thing. Oh, I could go on and on. It's such a lovely thing.
Well, one of the things that I found very interesting too is in your video, you were talking about how the face changes over time. That sometimes when you immediately pick up the body, there may be some stress resident in the physical body, but as this process unfolds, you see the face of the loved one completely transform. And to witness that, I mean, my mother died of cancer. There was a lot of pain. There was just a lot of trauma for everybody. And to have been able to witness that leave her, I think would have been an invaluable gift.
Yeah, it's true. That little smile happens usually on the second day when everything's completely relaxed and people are so touched. It gives them such comfort to know that the person is really relaxed now on all of that tightness and stress and trauma of dying. Because it's a labor to death. It's hard work to die, you know, and they
And
deserve
look,
to look
that
wonderful.
that's I was going to ask you a question. And guys, please, if you have questions, pop them in the thing for us. But one of the questions that I had for you, sweetie, is I'm kind of, I don't know why, put myself in your shoes. And I'm don't know why. Maybe it's my Scorpio, my obsession with this, but I the question that kept rising up for me is how would I hold space for the emotion that is associated with this. So there's holding space for the person that's passing, and then there's holding space for the family that is obviously going to feel sadness. But when you're talking about orgasmic death, maybe that's not resident in a funeral or a passing or transition of this kind.
Are you speaking of the family that are left behind?
Well, but basically, both, like for you, are you finding that you're being taxed in this process, either from working with the person who's passing or from the side of working with the family that's left behind? Are you personally swept up in the grief? Is there grief? As I said before, I heard orgasmic death. I'm thinking there's going to be grief surrounding the process. So, is there, and does it impact you at all?
Well, there's always sorrow, and I actually differentiate sorrow and grief, because I feel like sorrow is an opening of the heart into the realization that they loved this person so much and they're never going to see them again, which is just love pouring out of their heart. And that is very present at a home funeral. Lots of that love, liquid love, I call it. There's a lot of that. Grief, on the other hand, is, I feel, and it's just my own interpretation of it, has a sort of a longing to it and an attachment. So I wish the person was still here. I wished it had been different. That kind of grief is actually a little bit painful. And many people do experience that. That's a very real thing. And it's a different texture, different vibration than sorrow, I think. So most people experience sorrow at a home funeral, because here's this being that you love so much, you cared enough that you had a home funeral. So most of the people who call me forth, there's no attachment to the person. They're just sad. So that is very cleansing, actually, to be present to. And so I'm not really holding space. I'm just open to whatever. And I feel honored to be able to bear witness to that much love. So it's not draining at all. It's actually invigorating and refreshing. And wow, people are being real. They're being present. They're allowing what is. And it is such a contrast to what most people are doing, running around trying to get things achieve things and do things. So it's a delicious experience being there. So no, in answer to your question, it's not
Yes.
draining at all. No.
Livy, you're blowing my mind. I mean, you're really, like, literally blowing my mind. I'm going to call you Saint Livy from now on.
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
No, look, I mean, the words conscious dying, like, I literally understand the words on your website. But the experience of it, the taste of it, the essence of it is so much different than I had even imagined. And it's just absolutely beautiful. It really is. And, I've I don't know, I've lost both my parents, lost all my grandparents. I also have several girlfriends. We're kind of at the age where husbands are leaving, and that seems to be an extraordinary transformation for my girlfriends that have had a husband for a long time. And I've seen some amazing transitions, and I've seen, amazing attitudes, and like, the way that they've handled these situations has impressed me very much. But yes, there is obviously sorrow, and oftentimes there is grief, and it moves me, I don't know if I end up, if I'm empathetically picking up on that, but when I see my girlfriends, and a lot of them are just Facebook, not just, but they're Facebook girlfriends. I'm not in their space. I'm in their virtual space. And so that's, I guess, where that question was coming from, is that I kind of I need to come to class, obviously, because I'm handling it badly. And the way that you're approaching it, I think, is also going to just make the family's journey so much lighter as well.
It does seem that way. I don't know that I do anything. I just give them permission and provide a very wide open space for them to feel what's really there. And when they do, interestingly enough, what's really there is love.
Mm,
It's just love. They love
mm.
this person. Yeah. And now that they have no place to put their own love, and there's a little twinge of feeling a little lost and confused by that. So, but that's all it is. It's very human. And I don't, I think some of the problem perhaps of humankind is that we just don't dare to feel what really is. For some obscure reason, we've distracted ourselves for so long. It's become the habitual go-to response. And what I've learned through this journey that I've been on is that leaning into it, turning towards it, falling into this open space of, I don't know, this is huge. I mean, death is it's the biggest wide open space you could fall into, and actually really enjoying it, because the egos had to sort of been peeled off, like it or not. And now I'm left with just an essence of who I am. It's sweet. I like how it's
Gorgeous, sweetie. It is.
Yeah.
It's delicious. I'm going to come back to the orgasmic, because I want to know, how do we get from delicious to orgasmic, right? But you also work with pets, and I think that is beautiful. I think when I have my friends that lose their pets, in a way, there's a more it seems that those deaths are handled in a way that's more natural than the ones we have with our loved ones. That this home funeral process is more accessible to people in their thought processes, because it is a pet. And and some of the funerals that I've seen on your page are just gorgeous for pets as well.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you say that most pets are more natural, because unfortunately, most pets are euthanized these days, actually, which is not
No.
it's not the natural way. It's kind of interesting when you really look at that, what we're doing to our
Yes,
pets.
look, I'm from an outsider. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just
Mhm.
know that you're absolutely right. They do get them euthanized, and then they bring them home, and but they're doing the home funeral part, but they're not doing the conscious dying part. You're absolutely
Exactly.
right.
Yes, because an animal dies consciously, but it goes outside by itself. It doesn't want to be touched or made comfortable, like we all try to make our dying pet comfortable. And what the dying pet wants is to feel the earth underneath its belly, and to be left under the bush so it can just surrender to the earth. And we've taken that away from our pets, because we've domesticated them. So it's tricky, that because the our it I mean, I was faced with that when my own dog died, and he wanted to go outside, and he almost ran away from me the day before he died. And the neighbor found him under a bush, and I went, oh, perfect, he should die there. And then we all dragged him out and took him home. And I was like, why didn't we just leave him there? He was consciously dying. He knew what he was doing. But it goes against our feeling of I think what happened to me is I realized that the next day I'd find him covered in ants, and then I would feel badly, and I couldn't really leave him there in the city under the bush. So all of that is all entangled in, no, we've got to bring him home and put him on his bed and put the heat on, and which is the opposite to what he wanted. So yeah, I think we've kind of muddled that conscious dying piece for our pets. However, once they have died, the reason we bring them home is for ourselves. All of the animals I've witnessed, that they do eject themselves from their body, that I don't experience them hanging around, because they don't have the mental storytelling thing that we do, that what I talked about before, the difference between pain and suffering. They don't suffer, and I don't think they need to stick around in their body. We need to have them there, and I think it's very healthy for us, our psyche, to begin to process. So I do think it's a good idea to have a pet home funeral, but not maybe not necessarily 3 days. But at least a day or so for children to open that conversation, to be part of that, to lean into the death. It's lovely. It's lovely.
So, sweetie, when you're doing the actual death midwifery, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. How are people dealing with fear? And if they are, how do you work with that fear about their coming transition?
Well, almost everybody has fear about dying, because it's scary to go somewhere you've never been before or consciously, and to dare to tread that path, and knowing that you're saying goodbye to everything you've ever known. And even the bravest of us, I think, if we dare to be honest, there's fear there. The trick is to not let the fear dictate um, anything. Just allow it to be present, to feel it and watch it as a wave. And it moves, it changes in texture and length and tone. And that's why we have to practice being with these feelings now in our life. So when we're at our deathbed, we're not going to just recoil in horror because it's too big. We'll have gotten familiar with riding these waves of fear. And so I think most of my role is giving them permission to feel whatever is. And okay, they're really, really afraid. We don't have to try and figure out why, and we don't have to stop them being afraid. We don't have to give them some Ativan and make them calm down. We just have to give them permission to be open to feel it. And all anyone needs is to know that they're safe in their feeling, to know that somebody's right beside them and has got their back and will travel this path with them. So yeah, I'm not trying to make the fear go away. I'm putting space around it so they can feel it to its edges. And that's what being human is, after all, right?
It's
So
amazing. Look, I'm assuming that the people that come to you for the midwifery portion of your services are probably pretty conscious people anyway, but it also leads me to believe that they might be having the most human education that they had ever received in the last month of their life with you, sweetie.
yeah, well, not just me. I think everyone gets it. Just because they're dying, it's the most powerfully awakening experience that you'll ever have, if you dare to have it. Sadly, a lot of people choose not to. Give me the morphine, let me go to sleep. I'll wake up when it's over, which is sort of ironic because there's no. So yeah, yeah. It's a privilege to bear witness to that intensity. And
Amazing, sweetie. Absolutely amazing. Well, does anybody have any questions? If not, I'm going to let this lovely woman go about her evening. because I've been asking too many questions. I've been blocking everybody else out, Libby. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you so first of all, thank you for humanity, for doing this for humans. And thank you for taking the time with me today so that I can share this beautiful work with my magical Egypt people, because I think it really is such a gift. And even as I said, I've been stalking you, so I've got a whole new understanding. Let me just see if Ellen said this has been a fascinating conversation. So thank you so much, Ellen. But thank you so much, Libby, for your time and just wow, it's given me a lot to think about. Oh, first of all, before I let you go, all right, how do we get from delicious to orgasmic?
Oh, it's the same thing, isn't it? Where is there a
Maybe.
space between those two?
Oh, look, I'll I'll send you an email later because I have a very devious thought. But but thank you, Jolyn. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us today. And
Oh,
hopefully we'll come and see you once we can get out of Australia.
isn't it fascinating? And I just want to touch on that the whole COVID thing. It's the entire world is beginning to have a conscious dying experience. You know, we're waking up to these things that are dying in our life that that have to go. They're just not working anymore. And I think the reason it's going on so long is people just aren't getting it. They're waiting for it to go back to normal. And it's like when you're dying, there is no going back to normal. It's dying. Hello, it's ended. And I'm just fascinated by listening to people who can't wait for it to get back to normal. And I say, why would you ever want that? It didn't work the way it was working. And so perhaps we do need another year, um, sadly, but I've enjoyed this. I could not believe putting I used to have 20 people maximum in a lovely private home. We'd sit on the carpet and we'd have lots of hugs and we'd walk around the garden. And I couldn't imagine teaching the art of death midwifery on a Zoom call, but I had to. And I'm fascinated by the level of intimacy and connection that 40 little faces on 1-inch squares are able to have with one another. It's so exciting. It's like, oh my gosh, I could never have imagined that. So hey, what's going to happen next year? I don't know, but
I know, sweetie. Maybe we'll have Elon Musk brain implants and we can just do it like without anything. Can you imagine? That would be interesting. But look, I just started a thing called the Anamnesis Project, which is people remembering their past lives. And it's the same thing. It's so intimate and emotional to have 40 little faces. Like I haven't got 40, but I know exactly what you mean. All these little faces. And you can't really do the physical hug, but there's lots of emotional hugs going on. It's amazing. Or virtual hugs.
there are. Yes, it's delicious. Can I put my website in the chat here?
Yes, please, everybody, put it in. And I've already sent it in the email too, so don't worry, my love.
Oh,
And I'll put it in the video so that everybody can find you. But it is Sacred Crossings, and Livy's in.
and the actual training class is art of death midwifery. I'll put that in there too.
All right.
And yes, the classes for the fall are filling up. So I'm just so excited that more people want to learn about it, because I thought it's going to take forever, one person at a time. But
Oh, sweetie, no, look, I honestly think that this COVID thing is definitely waking us up to our mortality, and people are talking about it. And that's why your classes are growing. And so when I was looking at your classes, it's like kind of like you do a curriculum once a year. Is that correct?
no, I actually teach the program 3 times a year now, because it's one of
Okay. All
the,
right.
so I'm teaching it 9 months, yes, and then
All right.
I'm trying to get things on webinar for putting your advanced directives together. And
Great. Because I
yeah,
felt like I'd missed the first section, and when I was looking at the classes for myself. So that's great to know. So you do it 3 times a year, the
Yeah, you
entire
can
sort of
start
thing.
again in September, October, December, that, or September, November,
Fantastic,
December.
sweetie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
I'll have to sign up.
yes, you
Thank you.
will.
Thank you so much, Jill. And thank you. You have a wonderful evening. And I've enjoyed this. You've opened my eyes, and it's just been a delight to talk to you after so long. So you've made my day.
Well, you too, darling. Have a beautiful time there in Down Under, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Much love. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye, everybody. Thank you for being with us.